So, brethren, from everywhere, thank you so much for being part of again one of our continuing Zoom meetings that we've been hosting since we've been in Coronaville. Pleased today to have, by popular demand, Kurt Gazow. Kurt was hired as the Executive Director of Educational Technology in January 2014 by the Bellingham School District. If memory serves, Kurt was in the Vancouver School District in a similar position, and now he's living in Vancouver. I mean, living in Bellingham. So very, very cool. So in any event, let's see. Just going through that. In addition to working in public education, he's also worked as an academic cooperative program manager for Microsoft and has a bachelor's degree from the University of Washington. Go Dogs! Yay! And by the way, I've been to a Husky game with Kurt, so really good times. So with that, Kurt, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to go ahead and allow multiple shares, so you can go ahead and share your screen with us and give us some good and wholesome instruction on how to protect our identities and, for that matter, protect ourselves.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Most Worshipful. It is indeed a pleasure. There. Oh, we'll try that one more time. So thank you, Most Worshipful. It is indeed my pleasure to be down here again with everybody down in the district and to spend a little bit of time again talking about protecting ourselves online and kind of minding our digital footprint as we navigate through the times that we're in. Interestingly, and in the times of COVID-19, we have seen an increase in identity theft and different ways of our identities being compromised both personally and in the professional realm. So this is something that I deal with on a regular basis, and I'm happy to be able to talk with you about it. So my standard disclaimer, so I talk a little bit about how to protect yourself online. A lot of that is also dealing with managing your credit and locking your credit. So standard disclaimer that it's not legal or investment advice, but definitely something to be mindful of, particularly if, like me, you're trying to refinance your house. You need to be careful when you actually lock your credit and do different things. So nothing major, but definitely take a peek at that. So again, as Jim mentioned, my name's Kurt. I'm Mason. I'm actually from Bellingham Bay Lodge number 44. I was raised in Southwest Washington, down in North Bank Lodge number 182 in Southwest Washington. The ongoing gag is that I live the same distance. Now live the same distance from Vancouver as I did before. It's just the other one. So affectionately known as South Canada. So really enjoy Bellingham. It's a wonderful place to live and a wonderful place to be. Career-wise, I've been working in information technology for around 25 years. As Most Worshipful mentioned, formerly managed a computer science grant program for Microsoft shortly after I got out of college, and then moved into working in IT leadership in public education since the late 90s. So this is my gig. I enjoy the heck out of it. So a couple goals that I have. Goal one is I want to make sure that as we're going through this, all of you are learning a little bit more about what the threat of identity theft is, particularly what's called imposter fraud, which is what's been happening most often over the last couple of months of the COVID-19 infection. Two is that you really learn how to protect yourself. So you walk away from this knowing how to navigate a few more tools that will help you secure your digital footprint and manage your credit and your identity online. Three is you learn how to help others, because we all know that the best way to really learn something is in a way that you can teach others. So hopefully you'll be able to walk away from this knowing some of these things good enough that you can teach them to your brothers or other folks that you will have a chance to chat about. And have fun, ask questions. The last thing I want to be is boring. So as we're going through this, if you have any questions, I'm flexible on format, so definitely feel free to jump in, and we can talk in depth about any of this as we go along. So imposter fraud. It's an interesting thing, as we've navigated COVID-19. Identity theft has kind of changed definition a bit. So identity theft in some ways used to be solely somebody was able to obtain access to, different pieces and parts of your information, and then was able to apply for credit and do other things. Imposter fraud is kind of a new spin on, or a different type of a spin on that, where we're really seeing people start to curate large pieces of our individual identities and then using that to leverage different ways to get access to things of value. Most recently within Washington State, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth, it was a stress on the Employment Security Department, and really a massive organized attack on unemployment, which we're seeing a significant amount of stress on as a society right now with everything going on with COVID-19. And it really all, in many ways, gets back to the establishment of the Social Security system. So it's interesting thinking about, and we'll laugh about this a little bit, but, so Social Security numbers really came in 1936. That's when us having our own personal serial number really started to take effect. In the 70s and 80s, and David, I think you and I were probably in the same boat on this. When we're going through school, you pull up your records, and all of a sudden you find out, hey, my student identification number looks a little bit interesting. Wow, that's my Social Security number. So it was used a little bit more liberally back then, before it really became the larger threat, or the larger, call it an attack vector on people than it is nowadays. So late 80s and 90s, you saw Social Security numbers starting to draw back a little bit. People realize, well, this retirement thing, it's something that people can really use to get access to information. So you started to see it become more protected, and we started to see more and more of our data coming online. In 2005, that's really when we saw one of the first big, what's recorded really as one of the first large data breaches with a company called DSW. And DSW hemorrhaged a lot of information, a lot of personal information, credit card data. It's largely considered to be one of the first times that an organized data breach was really at least published publicly, that we all knew about. And then 2009 happened, which was something that was a very interesting thing. So 2009, and I kid you not, the group's name is called Scattered Canary. And everybody laughs when I say this. It's one of the things I love about working in this industry is the different names that these hacking groups end up taking on. But Scattered Canary was the one that really started to make an organized effort towards identity theft and imposter fraud, and trying to find ways to monetize scamming people online, and using this as a mechanism to make money in a nefarious way. So I always associate Scattered Canary with Nigeria, because that's actually where they were based out of. So a lot of times that's how they started off, was something that's called the 419 scam. So you've probably seen this if you've ever received the email that's the Nigerian prince. That's what that originally came from, of somebody saying, hey, I've got all this gold bullion, it's stuck. I just need somebody to help me process it. And hey, if you can help me out with some of the handling fees, I can give you a cut of the profit I make. So that's one of the ways that really email exploits and different scams started to take place. Interestingly, Scattered Canary was based out of Nigeria, so the thought is that was what really catalyzed a lot of their work. And this will be hard to see online. You don't really need to go into a lot of the detail on it. We'll hit on the next slide, but they started off way back in late 2008, early 2009, doing Craigslist scams. So you can think of it as, somebody says, hey, I've got this thing, I'm going to post it on Craigslist. I'm in Seattle, love to sell it to you. Yeah, go ahead and just hit me with a credit card charge, and I'll set up a time for you to pick it up. And then they never show. Except Scattered Canary was doing that from offshore, using scammed email accounts. So that's really how they started. And then, as you can see, they continued to branch and go into different ways to defraud people over time. And it originally started with one guy in a coffee shop and really blossomed out from there. So started from Craigslist scams, moved on in 2010 to romance scams. So somebody working on personal ads trying to say, hey, could you help me with my airline ticket or a way to get to see you? So that happened for about 5 years. That was pretty profitable. So they moved from there into email or phishing attacks more actively in 2015 to try to really take advantage of the intellectual property that was within email systems. In 2016, they moved into a very specific area called business email compromise. And that's something that's really more targeted towards finding a way to monetize drawing information out of corporations. So trying to get intellectual property, crown jewels data, trying to scam somebody in the payroll department to forward you a list of the employee social security numbers and direct deposit data to work with a different depositor, which then can be sold on the dark web for a tidy profit. So that's a lot of those. And then again, the really, really fun thing started. So Equifax was really the first social security number oriented data breach. So this was the one that really kind of set all of us in IT's hair on fire as we looked at this start to come out. So 146 million social security numbers were breached into the wild. Dates of birth, names, genders, phone numbers. So it's basically the menu of what you would need to open a credit card, open a bank account, start doing things to open up instruments of credit in other people's names, and created some challenging situations for all of us across the country. But this was even more so because this was a credit agency that was breached, which made it sting just a little bit more. So now we get into the situation that we're currently in. I'll be honest, when I made this presentation originally, I was really hoping we'd be out of it by now, but we're still in the midst of it, which is our COVID-19 environment. And it created really, in some ways, the perfect storm for identity theft for everybody who's working through the challenging times that we have now under the impact of COVID-19. We've had significant amounts of unemployment. We've had stresses on our unemployment claim system. And through this as an opportunity, the Scattered Canary Group really worked on an organized defraudment of state unemployment insurance groups or unemployment claim systems to defraud millions upon millions of dollars from state and local governments around the country. And a lot of us, including some of us here, were impacted directly or indirectly by it. So again, historic levels of unemployment, which caused a push on our employment in Washington State, the Employment Security Department, to accelerate that benefit process. So you didn't have a burst in staff, but you had a burst in claims. So how do we process them more quickly? Significant high call volumes, which means that if you do see a problem, it's really hard. It was really hard to get a hold of somebody to actually try to remedy that problem, and possible correlations of other open public data sets. So for those of us who work in the public sector, particularly in education, a lot of the correlating data for salary, job history, employment history is actually published by a number of different agencies online from a public visibility and accountability perspective. That does create combine a weakness in one system with a publicly available data set in another, and you're creating a great opportunity for some very interesting things to happen. And it was to me too. So I am, as they say, I'm in Hair Club for Men. I'm not just an owner. I'm also a client. So I'm not just the person running this presentation. I was directly impacted as well. So I get the benefit of actually giving you the inside tour of both the technical back end as well as the individual facing front end of a identity theft imposter fraud situation experienced during COVID, which was, in my mind, actually kind of fun. My colleagues didn't really think so, though. So again, this was back from May, but United States Secret Service started posting about this. It was broadcast news in the state of Washington as well, for many reasons, but a very large-scale organized threat targeted at Washington, but also North Carolina, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Oklahoma. So we weren't the only ones, but we certainly felt it significantly here in Washington. What's also interesting to look at is that it wasn't just unemployment fraud. So these are two examples of close colleagues that I work with, one of whose identity was used to take out a line of credit on their home. So that application was put into process. Another colleague had a loan opened for an RV in the state of Oregon using their data that was obtained through this. So just something to note of the interesting ways that your credit could be used in unanticipated ways through situations like this. So all of that is fun background. So this happened. You're kind of wondering now and saying, okay, well, all this is background data. You're kind of freaking me out. Now, what do I actually do with all of this? So there's a couple of really, in some ways, easy, concrete steps that you can take that will both help you find out if you may have been compromised in some way. And there's some easy steps that you can take to actually harden your identity online to actually make yourself a harder target so that you're harder to compromise in the future. So this is step one for everybody, and this is really anybody that you're talking to. And in some ways, when you look at the recommendations, they put this further down the line as a response to an instance of identity theft. If you don't know if you've been compromised, this is the best place to start, is to check your credit report. You can do it for free. You can do what's called a 3-agency credit report, because there's 3 credit bureaus that you'll need to check. There was legislation passed a number of years ago that made it the right of every individual to obtain their credit reports at least annually, which gives you an opportunity to review your credit history, make sure that there's nothing there that you look at and you say, well, I've never lived in California. Why do I have a credit card opened up with a California mailing address? That doesn't make any sense. So this is one of the best ways to start off the process. Look through it, make sure that there's no loans, credit cards, lines of credit, bank accounts, things that you don't anticipate being there, collections, a collection that was maybe sent to an address that's not yours. So all of a sudden you find that there's a collection dinging against you that you weren't anticipating. So this is a really good way to start off and find out if there's something that you need to dig a little bit further into. Since we're all in Washington, this is really step 2, and a strongly advised step 2 is to create a profile on Secure Access Washington. So this is another area for those of us who reside in Washington where your Social Security number can be claimed, and we'll describe that in a moment. But creating a SAW account actually, it's really useful. There's a lot of different things, renewing your tabs online, a lot of different park permits. The Secure Access Washington is a great tool to have access to. It also gets you into a check with the Employment Security Department, where you're not filing for unemployment, but you are checking to make sure that you lock your Social Security number so that you basically lock it up so no one else can claim it. And that's what I'm going to walk you through. So first thing you'll do is you go to secureaccess.wa.gov, and then if you don't have an account, if you have one, just log in. If you don't have one, click sign up. It's very easy to establish an identity. Once you get logged in, you'll go through a really quick process to link up to the Employment Security Department. So you'll add a new service. browse the list of service, and just pick the Employment Security Department from the list. Really straightforward. What that's going to allow you to do is something that's actually kind of cool, is for yourself, as long as you've resided in Washington, you don't need to file for employment through Employment Security Departments. You just look up your past wages. So this is something, it's not a ding on your credit, it's not anything, but working to establish your identity with ESD. And you'll note on the second slide there, it says, so you're almost there, so you just need to verify your identity. So that's the step you need to take, because they want to make sure that it's you. So right now, this is the process that you'd go through. So you put in your first, legal last, previous last name if you were married. So if your wife is filling this out and she had a maiden name, you put this in here to link that up. Social Security number, mailing address, and this is submitted on a secure form, so you should be able to submit that securely. And they're using that to verify your identity, so they can make sure they're matching you up with the correct records, because everything gets reported using your Social Security number. So the problem is when you've never registered before and you find out that somebody did that before you. So this is a direct shot out of mine. So I start out my social. So there's a couple things that are important to see here. So one is I've never registered at that point for, and I'll note that this is still right now is this way as well. They're still working through remedying this. This is an open case. My Social Security number was linked to what looks to be kegazow@mail.com. I've never had an address at mail.com. I've never used that as a mail service. So out of the gate, I know that I'm going to be having an interesting day. So a couple things. One is, if you do see this, look for the email address. And if you do see it, that means, well, you've registered it already. You just need to click recover your account. If you don't recognize the email address, absolutely do not click on recover account. What that will do is it will send a notification to the individual who just scammed your Social Security number and trigger them that which might then create a flurry of activity while they still have access to your data. So definitely, if you see this, don't tip your hand. This is what we're going to do, which is we're going to traverse over to a page to report some fraud to the Employment Security Department. So I advise everybody to take this step. It's really easy. It actually, again, once you do successfully register your Social Security number, if somebody tries to access it, it's going to be locked to your email address, so they're not going to be able to scoop that out from underneath you. I fully expect that Employment Security is going to be changing their registration practice in the near term to address this as a vulnerability. But right now it's still open, and this is the quickest way to resolve that particular threat. If you do find it, like I did, use the fraud reporting form, and they will start that process. And you're going to continue working the tree, because like me, you discovered, well, it's going to be an interesting journey. So one of the things that locking that Social Security number to an email address does is it creates, in a way, what's called a second factor on that Social Security number for that service. So when the third party gained access to my Social Security number, all they had to do was know what the number was. The majority of all of our Social Security numbers have been out since the Equifax breach. So he or she knew my Social Security number. They knew that I worked in the state of Washington based off of that second information thread. That's all it took. By registering that email address, it now turns into having to be something you know and something you have. So you both have to know the Social Security number, and you have to have access to the email address to validate it, which unfortunately, that's what he set up. So now it's really hard for me to get it back. So that's why we're working with Employment Security to work through that. But we'll talk more about 2FA in a little bit, but that's kind of the basics of why you would want to set that up. So, and again, if you have any questions about any of this, just unmute, speak up. Happy to talk about any of this as we go. So after that, next thing you're going to want to do if you find out you're having that bad day is freeze your credit. So there's a number of different ways to go about this. The FTC has some great information on how to go through the freeze process, and I've got the website up here. I'm happy to talk about that in greater detail. But what that will do is, if that threat actor then attempts to open credit using that information, my social security number, my wage data, things like that, they will hit a roadblock because the credit agencies will put a freeze on opening a new line of credit, opening a new credit card, or something along those lines with that stolen information. So that's why it's a good next step. It helps contain the potential damage that could happen. Next thing as well is placing a fraud alert. Again, that basically notifies creditors that you know that your information has been compromised in some form or fashion, and they want to see things like this because they don't want to be scammed any more than we do. So by placing a fraud alert while you're working through these fraud alert and a credit freeze, it helps kind of contain the potential damage as you're working through the recovery process on this. And as I noted, this originally kicked off actually in April for me. It's now July. I'm still working with Employment Security Department to get this resolved. So it's a fairly protracted process, and when you experience it, you could be in the grist for a while. So next step is, and this is especially true if going through that process you realize that somebody opened credit in your name, is to file a police report with your local, whomever your local law enforcement agency is. Some creditors or some agencies will need to have a case number to correlate this activity to. Again, what you're achieving by doing this is covering your bases to fully document this incident. So if you're going to a creditor who says, hey, you owe me a ton of money on this card that you opened, you can say, well, actually I don't, because I didn't open it. I was subject to identity theft. Here's the background. Here's the case number for me with Bellingham Police Department, where I filed this back a few months ago. Again, helps you build that case file around yourself, so you make sure that you're getting all your bases covered. So step 6. So this is where we get into optional stuff, and this is this really depends on you and on what you want to get into in terms of how deep you want to go into identity protection. Is a credit monitoring service, and I'll be very straightforward. There are good reasons and not so good reasons for engaging in a credit monitoring service. So it really gets into individual preference and taste as to whether or not this is something that you would want to do. On the don't get it side is the fact that there are ways that you can manage this through other methods. So if you're, as an example, if you know that you're not going to be going out for any loans or any credit instruments or anything along those lines, you can call the credit agencies and lock your credit. So nobody's going to be able to open credit in your name until you unlock it. So that locks your credit down. You do have the ability to pull your credit report right now more than annually because of everything that's going on, and you'll be able to find hard credit inquiries, attempts to pull credit, things like that. So you can do that. It doesn't cost you really a dime to pull that off. On the flip side of the coin, there's a couple things that a credit monitoring service will bring you should you choose to look into it. And they've branched into some other service areas, which does bring some benefit back to the table. So in addition to monitoring and managing your traditional credit score data, a lot of these agencies, LifeLock, Experian, will actually put additional ways of monitoring your identity. So Experian, as an example, looks for data breaches. So if you were an Etsy user and your username and your password was in Etsy, and Etsy had a data breach, and now that data is out there. Once that's discovered, these services will actually alert you to that, so you know, well, hey, I should go change my password. And if I use that same password on any other service, because I use Kurt's secret password 1, Kurt's secret password 2, Kurt's secret password 3 on everything that I use. I don't, but that would then be a threat. So again, something to think about. It really, in this case, I find them helpful, but it really does get into your personal preference. So bonus round for the quick run through. So for state employees, again, checking your other accounts. So there's other accounts that are available on the SAW website. So your Department of Retirement Services account, your different accounts which may have some link to your identity. Make sure that you're going through those and establishing your identity with each one of those sites, so that you make sure that you are in control and management of your own data. Check your credit monthly now, annually later. So right now you can actually pull your 3-agency credit report once a month if you choose to do so. That again helps you keep track of what might be coming down the pike, and on an annual basis. Before this incident, I have literally on my calendar. For me, I check it around my birthday. So I have a yearly reminder on my Google Calendar that pops up, pull credit report. And on an annual basis, I pull it, I look through the list, I make sure that there's nothing there that I'm not expecting. So it gets into a habit for me. Other people pull it around when they do their taxes, because you're dealing with financial information. Just build the habit to do that. It doesn't cost you anything, and it does nothing but give you good information about how creditors see you. Enhancing your security on other accounts. An example would be looking at a password manager like 1Password or LastPass to use hard passwords and potentially don't reuse them on different services, and then use two-factor or multi-factor authentication. What happens a lot of times if a service is breached, bad actors will use what's called a credential stuffing attack. So if they know that my email is kgazow@comcast.net and this is the password that was breached, they'll start using that username password combination and try to log into eBay, try to log into my bank, try to log into another service they can purchase something through. So using password managers helps make that process of using unique passwords a lot easier to manage and a lot less strain on keeping track of them. Don't reuse passwords. That's the credential stuffing attack. Another service that's a great one is there's an email, or there's a website, Have I Been, and that's not owned. That's pwneb.com. That site is run by a Microsoft researcher who runs it completely for free. He looks at every different credential breach that comes out. Once you've registered your email address or your email addresses, if you have multiples, anytime he sees those come up in any kind of a data breach, you will automatically get a notification that your email address has shown up in a service that has been breached. And he'll tell you, here's the service, here's when the breach happened, here's what was compromised, and you'll know that this is something that you should get in front of and change your password with that particular service. And again, password managers. LastPass has a free version, which works great. That's a great entry point for that. I'm personally a 1Password user. They've got a great way to share password vaults among families. So my wife and I have 2 different vaults that we keep independently, and then we have passwords for bank accounts and things that we share. So it's a great way to set that up, and even for your kids as well, if that's something that would be a good fit. So after all of this, the couple of things, and I really do encourage you, if you have questions along the way, to ask anything. I'm happy to talk in any detail about it that you like. Is thinking a little bit about how phishing attacks work. So this is just a couple more things to think about, just so that you understand them a little bit more. So phishing attacks, as they come in, this is the entry point to people's identity getting compromised. More often than not, is replying to one of these, and then you lose your email address and your password. So I won't talk through the entire slide, but basically how it starts is somebody sends you an email and they say, hey, your email account is over quota. Your account's about to be shut off. We need your password, or we need you to log into this site so that we can make sure that you don't lose access to your account. The email will look like something that is legitimate. The logos will be there, but it just feels, you look at it and the spidey sense starts to tingle. So oftentimes, and more often than not, whenever you're asked to be diverted to a site like that, 8 times out of 10, it's somebody trying to steal your information. So there's a couple of things that you can look for, as you look at these attacks. So these are a couple, literally, I drug out of my inbox about when I pulled the presentation together, and I had a few. So a couple things to think about. So this is the email that I had come in. So, dear Microsoft user, this is the last time we notified you that we will stop processing incoming emails in your account. Reasons are you failed to verify your Microsoft account, which may lead to permanent delete of your account from our database base in the next few hours. So the language looks a little sketchy. The grammar isn't great. So that's kind of your first indicator. So looking at this, the graphics look a little odd. So I looked at the email, and it says, well, it's from Account Update. Well, it might be legitimate, except Account Update is apparently run by Gary and Helen at live.com. So again, here's an indicator to look for. So when you see a message that looks like it's from Comcast or looks like it's from one of your providers, when you look at that from address, does it look legitimate, or does it look like it's coming from an individual's account? Likely in this case, Gary and Helen fell victim to a phishing attack, and they then use this as another attack vector to send more phishing attacks at other people. The 2 is not to me, so that's another indicator. So it wasn't sent to me individually, it was sent generically to Microsoft at service.com, which means that I was blind carboned on it. Whenever you're blind carboned on something, that should be an immediate stop point. If you're receiving something from a financial institution or your provider, it's probably going to be addressed to you. The other thing to look at is when I look at the actual link. That link, I'm digging through it, and it makes absolutely no sense, but you can, if you see on the second line about midway through, it's going to docs.google.com. Google Forms are the biggest way that credentials are often stolen. They'll take a Google form, they'll make it look like a login page, and then use that to steal your data. So that's a kind of an anatomy of one phishing message that came in. This is one that looked a little bit more legitimate. And again, this is one that just came through to me. So again, the email says it's from Amazon. However, the email address is not from Amazon. It's from kikacrow003.com. Probably a little specious there. Again, it's a blind carbon copy. It's not to me. Again, there's odd language in the subject line, so it looks a little bit odd. Body of the message is an image. That's another indicator. Phishing attacks will often use an image as the content rather than actually putting the text in, which is a method to avoid email scans to dump things into your junk mail folders. So if you see the body of a message being a full image, that's another way to look at that. And again, bad English, right? So a little bit of bad grammar in there, which, I'm a lit guy, so I look for that, but that's just me. Another one that's coming through, and Jim and I talked a lot about these, is literally smishing or SMS phishing. So this is something, again, that is becoming more and more prevalent as we spend more and more of our lives, using mobile devices. SMS phishing is one of the latest attack vectors that's out there. So this is so this is one example. I have one more that I don't have in the deck that I'll share. So what looks a little bit off about this? So it looks like it's from Wells Fargo. For starters, I don't have a Wells Fargo a bank account. That's my mortgage is there, but I don't have an account with them beyond that. I don't recognize that URL, so I need to update my information, but it's at login-wells.com. That's not Wells Fargo. And who's thffmq@wells.net. So again, making sure that these are ones that we don't act on. Worst case, if you have a question, contact your bank. I'm sure they're going to be more than happy to help you navigate that. So this is a bit of a different one. So I'm going to put a couple people on the spot, and with what we talked about with phishing emails and phishing attacks. When you look at this message, what jumps out at you as being a little bit odd, or would give you a question? David, I saw you on mute. Go for it, man.
Is that Denmark? De.de?
That's Deutschland.
Deutsch, Germany. Okay, I wasn't sure Denmark or Germany. Okay, so that's for me. It's it looks like Apple, but then if you look at where it's .com.de.
Exactly right.
I've got my iPhone right.
Mm-hmm.
I've got my iPhone right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
It's not lost.
Exactly. So again, you're reading it on your iPhone, which says your iPhone's lost. That might be your first indicator. But again, when we dig into that URL, is Apple going to send us out to a third-party site? Because it's really through verify.com.de, so they're also sending you offshore. So whenever you get something like this, again, start with a sense of questioning and then kind of build back. But both of those great points to look at. So I'm all talked out. So I'm happy to, I know you're surprised, right? So I'm happy to dig into a couple others. The other, just on this one, which I neglected to mention, one of my personal favorites is and this is literally one that happened to a colleague in my office. They were on the phone with an individual. Hi, Mr. Colbeth. This is Kurt from Bank of America. I'm glad I was able to reach you. So we're validating our contact information on our accounts. We want to make sure that we are sure that we're able to access your account, and we're making sure that we have two-factor authentication enabled for all of our accounts. So Mr. Colbeth, this is to make sure that your data is protected and that you are kept safe from any attacks to attempt to gain access to your bank account. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to validate your two-factor configuration. So in about 2 seconds, Mr. Colbeth, you should be receiving a text. Oh, you got that. Great, perfect. So I just need you to read back the 6-digit code from your text message, just so I can make sure that we have that configured correctly. Can you read that back to me, Mr. Colbeth? Thank you, sir, and thank you for banking with Bank of America. Have a wonderful day. Click. So that process gave them access to the two-factor authentication, which then gave the bad actor access to that individual's bank account. So again, for as many ways as there is to attempt to compromise your information, there's going to be somebody who's trying to find a creative way to do that. So with that, brothers, I'm happy to again talk through any questions you have or anything that you want to dig through. I love doing this stuff, and I'm happy if I can answer any questions that you have. So I promise I'll be quiet.